Morning, everybody. So I'm Cameron Groves. I have the pleasure of leading our Solutions Innovations team. And so what exactly does that mean? So for the past 7 or so years, I've been in leadership roles at VMware, and the most recent one I was at was I led and built our solution architecture team. And I was brought in by our leadership team to focus in on our actual, how can we solve customer problems with our products as well as our partners' products as well and services. And so Dr. Pruitt, when your opening keynote was actually absolutely perfect for what I'm going to be speaking to you about today, which is centered around a cyber range. How can we gamify and create a secure environment to be able to train employees, students, whomever, around cyber in particular? I'm going to take you through that here just now. Who has read, or who knows Thomas Friedman? Anyone read this book? Thank you for being late. In this book, and in fact, he's a local, he lives up in Maryland, he's a New York Times columnist. He's from Beirut to Jerusalem was probably where he was most well known in terms of making his inroads there. But in this book, he covers 3 main areas that really have revolutionized the world in which we live in today. The first, I'm going a little bit out of order for those of you that have read the book, but the first that he covers is on globalization in terms of just simply market, in terms of connections of societies and the sort. The third is around just climate change in terms of what that's brought on. And then you probably can imagine what the first is, technology. And into technology, what happened in 2007? The iPhone, right? In addition, VMware went public as an organization, and he calls attention to is that without VMware, there could be no cloud. And he goes on to cover that in terms of offering perspective around ultimately the technology and the innovation that was underway there has led the world in which we live in today overall from a perspective of cloud computing. And so just to begin with just an anchor slide that really defines our vision. And let me take a step back. Our CEO, Pat Gelsinger, has a saying, is technology for the force of good or for the force of bad? And of course, what we've been discussing up here just now with the panel, leading obviously with respect to the opening keynote, many could argue to say it can be used for the force of bad. But we argue to say that we can give you a choice in terms of driving towards the force for good, in the sense of giving you choice, of being able to run any application, whether it's cloud native, whether it's traditional workloads, on any device across any cloud. So that's our vision. Let me click into and transition into the cyber range concept that I want to cover here today. There's a whole host of different types of attacks out there, and you all know them better than I do, quite honestly. From denial of service attacks, SQL injection, and so on and so forth. But what's staggering here in terms of statistics is 48% are criminal, so force for bad. But you think about the counter here, the balance of the statistics here is 27% human error, 25% IT and business process oriented. So arguably within our control, right? When you think about, obviously, all the breaches that have occurred and as it relates to the statistics surrounding that, we argue to say that there's 5 main areas in terms of driving towards readiness. How are you ready? When you look at also responsiveness, who do I call in terms of when I have an incident? How is it documented? To the example that was given earlier, it was documented electronically, not in paper. How are we going to recover, that recovery plan, and how we're going to be resilient? And so when we started to think about how we're going to ultimately solve this problem in terms of the negative unemployment with respect to cybersecurity professionals and the sort, we came up with this concept of cyber range. We'd already been doing a lot of the work, honestly, within the DoD in terms of enabling cyber ranges. You look at the National Guard and how they're ultimately being done is built on our platform in terms of VMware. But how can we take it to the next level? And so just to define what cyber range is, if you can imagine basically a room like we're sitting in right now, and if you look, by the way, if you Google or go to YouTube, called Lock Shields, it's one of the largest cyber ranges underway for around 26 or so nations. But effectively, it's a simulation. It's a simulation exercise. It's a platform that enables the cybersecurity teams to find and develop cybersecurity expertise in a virtual and safe environment, as defined by Gartner. And if you look at the research that's underway here by Gartner, and I've talked to the analysts as a result of the solution we put together, you can see ultimately the amount of uptick that's going to be targeted from the standpoint of ranges themselves. So why is this important? Why not just do static training as a result? And so when you think about how can we not move from both static training to be able to do live simulated environments, you can draw several analogies. And now, as I realize this plane looks like it's turning into the mountain, probably not the most accurate example, but it gives you a sense of flight simulator. If you want to draw another analogy of what a cyber range can do, look at going to like Topgolf in terms of doing those types of activities. Or if you draw the analogy of a gun range, similar. Bringing people together in a live environment to simulate an actual attack together. An example I'll pull on a little bit later on is the North Carolina Department, CISO down there, State Cyber Risk Officer Maria Johnson. She actually is looking to bring together 5 different organizations, public and private sector and academia, and to be able to test out her emergency operations plan during the course of a 2-day exercise. What better way of doing that and be able to simulate that in a real life environment versus just simply doing a tabletop exercise as a result. So there's a variety of different use cases surrounding cyber ranges and bringing people together. There's the crawl phase in terms of static learning, being able to sit in front of your laptop and be able to conduct live exercises in a self-contained environment. There's a dynamic exercise as you move up towards a crawl and a walk phase is around being able to form teams. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard about red team, blue teaming of perhaps your own network. But in the example I gave just a moment ago of Lock Shields, what if you had 26 blue teams, all looking at your industrial control systems, being able to protect them, and you have one hacking team that's going to basically come and attack you, and you have gamified the whole scenario, meaning you have scoreboards and the sort to be able to detect things. Then you look at the fact of like running or sprinting. When you think about a use case here is around simulating my entire production environment to the extent that's possible with the technology available, and ultimately be able to actually hire a third party to be able to red team my environment. Not my production network, but completely segregated off from your production network in a segregated environment. So these are the variety of use cases as a result. And so as you can see up on the slide here, is we introduced this cyber range solution that's built on a digital learning platform, which is a collection of technologies. This can be delivered on-premise, it can be delivered off-premise, it can be delivered in a hybrid manner. And so many of the conversations I've been having recently have been honestly using the cloud to be able to do this. Completely don't have to worry about the infrastructure side of things as it relates to that. So if you look at the cyber range solution, it provides consistent infrastructure. You can support VMs, you can support virtual machines, you can support containers. An example I'll touch on here in a minute is we're partnering with Dreamport. For those of you that are not aware of that, it's a nonprofit up in Central Maryland that supports US Cyber Command. They're running all VMs in terms of their blue team network, and then red teams, there's a single Docker container host with the 5 containers that's part of the hacker for the red team. So my point is that you can deliver a very consistent infrastructure platform as a result. Then you have a control plane to be able to control all those elements. And then of course you have the cybersecurity user portal to be able to support that. But all this is not to say is that VMware is a very strong infrastructure company. And when we were building this solution, we knew we needed to partner with an organization. And so we worked closely with Brian DeMuth. I reached out to him. He's CEO of Grim Cyber. And for those of you that don't know, I was in a customer meeting just recently, and unprompted, a gentleman said, "Oh my goodness, you're working with Grim?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "I believe they have probably 10 of the world's best hackers on staff there." So as a result of that, you have our platform that is well known in terms of the industry, married up with a very strong content provider as a result. And so one of the things that we can work with customers is around providing that classroom type of curriculum for you as you're looking at conducting cyber training and cyber exercises. We have developed a level 1 foundation that I'll touch on here in a minute, but we can go all the way over to the top right-hand side of this slide. We'll talk about data exfiltration and those types of exercises. And so if you think in this foundation level, these are the 5 elements of the content pack that we've developed. What you can see here is web applications, SQL Server injections, and the sort, file systems, data servers. And we actually on Friday of this last week, we were down there supporting Maria for her Cybersecurity Awareness Month symposium, and we actually brought in 20 or so of her staff members and created an environment where there was a scoreboard up on the screen, and we went through all these over the course of around an 8-hour period of a day. And as you probably can imagine, you would think that the cybersecurity team won. I'm here to say that the web application developer team won. It was kind of funny when the deputy CISO came up to me afterwards. But my point here is that these types of foundational, you think there's just simple exfiltrations or exploitations. They're not. They're very common as a result of what's in environments today. So what about giving individuals a hands-on skills to be able to operate and be able to write Python scripts, to be able to go and target those target systems and which ones are vulnerable using Nmap and Metasploit in terms of all the things that are available in terms of tool sets today. And so just to touch on here, as you can see with North Carolina Department of IT, I've already touched on that. We're working with Armando C. and Carl Gumtow up at Dreamport, where we're doing a rapid prototyping event. We talk about IoT. This is something called a riot in the factory, is what you see represented here, where we've actually worked with them. They've simulated a full city in terms of actual factories, water purifiers, and the sort. And we actually are underpinning that and enabling that exercise as we speak. So we support the virtual elements of what's being done there from the hackers, but then also as it relates to the physical assets there and protecting them and conducting the exercise. In addition, for those of you that are down familiar with Augusta, Georgia, of course, the Cyber Center Excellence down there, we were down at B-Sides. Augusta is a hacker conference. And so as a result, you can see hopefully the prototyping that's going underway and where we're showcasing this solution. So just to wrap up with the value, and going back to those four main areas, the readiness, response, recovery, and resiliency. If you look at our solution as a whole, we can support exercises and competitions. How can you ultimately, through training, drive this notion of gamification? I mean, I was actually surprised about esports. I don't know if many of you know about esports and how colleges and universities are focusing in on that, which is just amazing to me in terms of the millions of dollars that are being paid out. I think like a 13-year-old won $3 million recently over that. So regardless, though, it gives a sense of building a team environment to come together in an exercise to be able to learn the skill sets that are absolutely necessary to support our nation's infrastructure. We have content. Our partnership with GRIM hopefully gives you the sense of the realness of this in terms of the different types of exercises you can conduct in a live environment. From the standpoint of assessing, we have the opportunity to be able to assess individuals through a scoreboard mechanism, be able to give scores, be able to give hints, and reduce the number of scores that are available. From the standpoint of our testing and preparation, you can actually give the manuals in advance for them to be able to study as a result. We can integrate into existing environments that you already have invested in as it relates to public cloud and the sort. We can actually do a full-on network simulation. So one of the key capabilities of a cyber range is being able to replicate a full-blown production network environment. And we can absolutely do that from the standpoint of your internet ingress and egress points, your DMZ, your existing corporate network, and the sort. And then from there, we drive the notion of segmented and security. All that I'm talking about is live. It's all being segmented off from your production network as a result through the use of the technology that's available to you. And then, of course, automation. This is where things go beyond the element of being able to manually build these environments. We've already pre-built them. That gives you the notion of being able to blueprint this and do a rinse and repeat, an update, and drive this notion of infrastructure as code to deliver a cyber range solution to you in terms of helping you drive your team as a result. So to come back to our anchor slide here in terms of VMware as a whole, I mentioned about cyber range and how the value of it is in terms of the notion of being able to drive training, like was mentioned at our keynote here. It's absolutely vital in terms of our organization. I'm looking forward to partner with you all as it relates to that. As you can imagine, VMware is making this, maybe you're not aware, but VMware just spent over $1 billion and closed the acquisition of Carbon Black. We're taking security very seriously and to the point of actually creating a whole separate business unit inside of our organization led by Tom Korn, who was previously the CTO for RSA as part of the Dell Technologies family. So with that, I hopefully got us back on time, Sam, in terms of our overall agenda here. But I'm happy to take any questions. If not, thank you very much for your time and look forward to talking to you further about this. Thank you. Any questions, or so folks want to go to break? Oh, please.
During the last panel, there was a lot of talk about machine learning. Mm-hmm. Machine learning relies a lot on labeled data. The cybersecurity problem for machine learning is very challenging because of the concept drift and model decay, because the environment is not static. So the traditional method of training using labeled data and then throwing a model in the operation eventually will decay. I think your tool here might be useful in generating dynamic data, labeled data, that can keep updating the models.
Yes, so mainly what's key to a cyber range in particular is traffic generation and being able to generate traffic, simulate traffic in type of a segregated environment. And that's where machine learning, there's obviously solutions out there or products out there that can help partner with us in terms of the simulation, both open source and commercially available. I mean, machine learning, what's interesting about it, everyone talks about artificial intelligence, and there's many different perspectives on it. Is it truly artificial in terms of what it is? Is there true AI, right? And I think what was mentioned at the panel is that they're hiring different types of individuals to avoid biases, right? And that's really when you get into some elements of really thinking about the adversary in terms of it in a different light. To be able to train a model in that way, I think is vitally important when it comes to looking at machine learning. So, any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to talking to you further. Thank you.